Clarence Horton. On behalf of historic Cabarrus and Cabarrus County, welcome to another historical moment in the story of old Cabarrus County and her people. President Bush's recent request for National Guardsmen to assist in patrolling the Mexican border reminds us that there's truly nothing new under the sun. 90 years ago, in June 1916, another American president, Woodrow Wilson, requested the North Carolina Guard, including the company from Cabarrus County, to travel to the Texas-Mexican border to assist General John Joseph Blackjack Pershing, who was then engaged in pursuing the Mexican revolutionary and outlaw Francisco Pancho Villa. In 1914, Mexico became a battleground as revolutionary forces ceded to unseat dictator and president Victoriano Huerta. When they did so, 3 Mexican strongmen and revolutionaries vied for control of Mexico: Pancho Villa, Zapata, and Carranza. When the United States and the countries of Central and South America recognized Carranza as rightful president of Mexico in October 1915, Villa was enraged. In January 1916, he killed 16 American mining engineers. In March 1916, he and his troops crossed into Columbus, New Mexico, and killed 18 American citizens. Wilson called on troops of the regular army under the command of General Pershing to travel to Mexico and arrest Pancho Villa. Pershing left for the Mexican border with 6,000 men. On his staff was a young, fiery lieutenant who later became quite a legendary general himself during a later war, George S. Patton. On June 18, 1916, the militia of North Carolina was called into federal service. The men of Company L quickly assembled at the old armory, which was then located on the second floor of the Allison Building on South Union Street in Concord. The Allison Building was demolished in 1972 to make way for the present Cabarrus County Courthouse, which occupies that site. The following day, June 19, Captain L.A. Brown wired General Young to notify him that the company was fully mobilized and up to its strength of 65 men. Captain Brown was notified that the wartime strength of the company was to be 142 men, and recruitment immediately began for the additional men necessary to make up the company's full strength. Recruitment began that same afternoon, and men from Concord began to enlist. A call was also sent out to the surrounding communities in Kannapolis and in Albemarle and China Grove, a call for men to join the company. The call to the colors went to nearby communities in Kannapolis, Albemarle, and China Grove. The eager recruits included veterans of the regular Army, such as Sergeant C.N. Alston and J. Ed Parnell, Jr., as well as Herbert T. Cook, who was a veteran of the Spanish-American War, and Johnny Fultz, a Navy veteran who had faced sniper fire in 1914 when Vera Cruz was occupied. On June 22nd, the company marched to the old Cabarrus County Courthouse for an impressive ceremony dedicating the fountain on its lawn to the memory of the Cabarrus Black Boys, the legendary heroes of the Regulator War in 1771. The following day, Company L assembled on the lawn of the J.F. Goodman home on the corner of North Union and Grove Streets, present location of the Black, Rogers, Ruth, and Grossman law firm, for an impressive ceremony. The Daughters of the Confederacy, as represented by members of the Dodson Ramseur chapter, presented 2 flags to the company, urging them to carry them with honor and return them home without stain or dishonor. The company left from the armory the following day, marched to the depot, and there disembarked for Camp Glen on the North Carolina coast. As one of the first companies there, they pitched their tents overlooking Bogue Sound. After physical examinations, 46 disappointed men from the company were rejected for failing their physical examinations. Most of them were considered to be underweight. Some of the remaining men were transferred to the understaffed Asheville Company for service. The remaining members of Company L were well disciplined, however, and soon settled into the routine of camp life. They relieved the boredom of drills and guard activities by traveling to Fort Macon on fishing trips, by singing in the 1st Regiment Choir, and even by forming their own band. In September 1916, the well-trained Cabarrus volunteers left by train for Camp Stewart at El Paso, Texas, and service on the Mexican border. They arrived in San Antonio, Texas on the 29th of September and were delighted to be greeted by 2 former Concord residents, Mrs. Clegg and Mrs. McKellar, who met them at the train with some of their Texas neighbors and distributed ice cream and postcards to the troops. They settled into the quarters at Camp Stewart, which were being left by the departing Pennsylvania Guardsmen, and soon settled into the routine and boredom of camp life. Getting used to the heat and dust of Texas was not easy, however, and the Guardsmen were delighted when President Wilson withdrew General Pershing and the Guardsmen and the regular Army troops from the Mexican border to meet the menace that was posed by the threat of Germany, which had once again violated American neutrality and sunk American shipping. They left Texas in February 1917. Company L arrived in Concord at 3 o'clock in the morning on February 8, 1917. Most of them remained in the train until 8:30, so as not to spoil the plans of those townspeople who had planned a big homecoming celebration. They marched from the depot to the historic courthouse in a parade nearly a mile long, which included 25 motor cars, the Boy Scouts, and representatives from almost every civic organization in the county. The parade also included veterans from the Mexican, Spanish-American, and Civil Wars. Company L it was noted by the local papers, had returned their flags once again without stain or without dishonor. In July 1918, the Congress created a new medal, the Border Service Medal, for those who had served on the Mexican border in 1916 and 17, for which the company became eligible. The returning troops were anxious to resume their civilian lives, but their rest was to be brief. The United States and a reluctant President Wilson were being inexorably drawn into the European War. In March 1917, it was ordered that Company L be again recruited to full war strength. In April 1917, President Wilson asked the Congress to declare war on Germany. General Blackjack Pershing was sent to Paris to command the American Expeditionary Forces. By November 1917, National Guardsmen from 26 states, including North Carolina, and from the District of Columbia, had traveled to France as part of the Rainbow Division to pay an ancient and honorable debt to Lafayette and his countrymen, which had been owed them since the American Revolution. The tedium of drill and training on the Mexican border stood the Cabarrus County troops in good stead. They served with distinction and with honor in the trenches and hedgerows of Europe. Not all the troops returned home, but those who did brought back their flags without a hint of dishonor, as they had always done in the past. Thank you for joining us for another look at a page in our history. We hope to see you again real soon.